happy first day of November. Welcome to the Clemson Dubcast. Hope everybody out there is doing well. Kind of a strange week. You know, Dabo says they remember November. I'm not sure how many people are going to remember a game against Wofford. You know, I'm cool with making these types of games, you know, keeping those in the opening slot because there's intrigue about how your team's going to look and all that. It just feels strange in November when the weather's cold and you're used to monumental football and high stakes. Anyway, that's sort of the topic of the final thoughts that I just wrapped up, and it'll be on TigerIllustrated.com later this afternoon. Also, Paul Strelo right now has some Friday recruiting nuggets that have been on the site for a couple of hours now, and got even more stuff coming on the site at midday today and then later on in the afternoon and through the weekend. Our title sponsor of the Dubcast from way back in the beginning, August of 2018, Parham Smith & Archenhold Law Firm in downtown Greenville. Blake Smith, a good friend of mine, he's been representing plaintiffs in medical negligence and other personal injury cases for over 15 years. Blake serves on the advisory board for the paralegal program at Greenville Technical College. He recently completed his 10th year as an adjunct pro bono professor at Clemson University, where he teaches sports law. Blake was also featured in a recent Consumer Reports heart surgery risk article. In other words, Blake and everybody else at Parham Smith & Archenhold know what the heck they're doing. Free consultations, 864-990-4581 or online at parhamlaw.com. Our newest podcast sponsor, been with us for a few months now, Blackacre Law Firm, sister law firm of Parham Smith & Archenhold in Greenville. Stuart James is a 1998 Clemson grad, big Clemson fan, just like the Parham Smith & Archenhold family. Blackacre gives you the representation you can depend on when you're on the home stretch, closing on your house, all those documents you're signing, all those technical aspects of it. The last thing you want is for something to go wrong at that point. Blackacre also provides services for wills, powers of attorney, durable, and healthcare. Don't put yourself and your family in a bad situation by not having these important documents. Call today for a consultation, 864-775-5400, or go to their website, blackacrelawfirm.com. That's BLACKACRE lawfirm.com. Okay, Mickey Plyler, Upstate radio celebrity, making his third appearance with the Dubcast. Just figured we'd check back in with him and sort of revisit some of the notions we had at our last visit on the podcast late August. What's changed, what hasn't, and what to make of things moving forward with college football, with Clemson, and even quite a bit of talk about what's going on down in Columbia. Okay, here we go. Enjoy. All right, joined by, on Halloween evening, my good friend Mickey Plyler. How you doing, man?
I'm great, man. I'm fantastic. How's your Halloween go well?
Well, the weather is, you know, I was talking about this with one of my daughters on the way to school. You know, it seemed like a total washout. I'm like, you know, with Facebook and all this other stuff, all these petitions and people getting mad about stuff and affecting change, you know, we should be able to get enough momentum to get everybody to agree to postpone Halloween till Friday.
It makes sense. We do it for other holidays, like, right, don't we? So we can, you know, we celebrate holidays on observed holiday day rather than the actual day, right? So we can do Friday seem like make some more sense to me.
I just
get it done, man. Get it done.
I just don't spend enough time on Facebook, so I'm probably not the guy.
Get it done.
So I just had this idea that popped into my head, I guess yesterday, when we last visited, when you actually interviewed me. That ain't happening again, by the way. Thank the Lord. But that's before the season. Yeah. And we have all these preconceived notions back then, including you getting me to say that Trevor Lawrence is going to win the 2 Heismans and Clemson's going to win, I don't know, 5 national championships in 10 years. And so here we are. Clemson's 8-0. And the most interesting thing, I guess, to me, college football-wise, is after we spend the whole offseason saying, it's going to be Clemson and Alabama far and away ahead of everybody, it seems there's more parity, I guess, up top, and as a result, maybe more excitement in the semifinals in the playoffs. Is that...
I think so. I mean, I'm always careful. You know, Tomorrow's November.
Yeah.
And I went back and looked at it the other day and just looked at when TCU and Baylor, and we've seen. I mean, Miami was undefeated this time a few years ago. Remember that? Where
Mississippi State in 2014.
Yeah, so we were always, what are we going to do with all these undefeated teams? And I just believe in November we saw it with Georgia and Wisconsin.
Yeah,
with Georgia and South Carolina, 24-point favorite maybe. We saw it with Illinois. Illinois was a 30.5-point underdog.
Yeah,
and I was on the Illinois train, man. I thought Illinois was great. Wisconsin. I should say Wisconsin was great. And then we saw it this past weekend with Oklahoma. And I really thought that they were, a playoff-bound team. It still might be. My point, though, is got a whole another month of this.
Yeah.
And it's going to play out. And somebody, can you see Ohio State losing? I can.
Yeah.
Can you see LSU losing? I can. In Alabama, I can see them losing.
Yeah.
I don't really see Clemson losing. But, heck, if North Carolina could almost beat Clemson, and if Illinois can beat Wisconsin, then sure NC State or South Carolina could, or Virginia or Pittsburgh, whoever comes out of the Coastal could maybe. So, yes, to answer your question, but no. Just because 2 weeks ago I thought we were talking about 6 or 8 teams. Now maybe 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. With that said, though, really – in the playoff era, the first year we had we had one good playoff semifinal game. Mm-hmm. Alabama and Ohio State was a good game. The Oregon-Florida State game was not good. Mm-hmm. And since then, the Georgia-Oklahoma Rose Bowl was great, but almost every other semifinal game has been a dud.
Yeah.
So, yes, Alabama and Clemson still, but like you said, maybe the semifinals will be more compelling this year.
I just look at it's a great point that, hey, we've been sitting here in this same spot with these preconceived notions, not preconceived, but just these notions that have been shattered thereafter over the next month. But I just think that as you look at Ohio State, not many people thought Justin Fields was going to be the catalyst that he's been. Chase Young was, going to be the best player in college football probably, and that they would look like, they really – walking off the bus and even on the field, if you sat there and said, Larry, and as I guess Herb Street and other people have said, that looks like the best team in college football, I'm not going to disagree with you. And then LSU's offense doing what it's doing. Alabama's offense is Alabama's offense as long as Tua is there. And so I'm just starting to, I guess, sort of, thinking of, okay, the things we had wrong in the offseason was maybe based on what happened in Santa Clara or San Jose, that were things skewed by the defensive line, this generational Clemson defensive line, and maybe things are a little more even at the top than maybe we thought during the offseason. What mistakes did we make, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, again, at this point.
Right.
At this point, and it's different than 3 weeks ago. Three weeks ago, didn't you think Georgia was going to go undefeated?
Yes.
South Carolina beat them and made their offense look really, really bad. So, I don't know. But at this point, I'm more impressed with LSU's offense than I would have ever believed. That's clear what Burrow's done, their wide receivers has done, and they're running the ball a little bit better than I thought they would have. They're still not the old LSU running game,
right? But
they're balanced now at least, and they've got a dynamic playmaker at quarterback that gets the ball out. Ohio State, there are times where they look really good to me. I'm more impressed with their defense than their offense, though. Uh-huh. Offensively, when I watch them, it's zone read, and don't get me wrong, Dobbins and Fields reminds me of the old when Rich Rodriguez had Pat White and the running backs 5 and 10. 10. So the zone read was hard. It's a fastball changeup. It's going to be hard to beat, and then run some play action off of it. But in the back of your mind, is there any way you think that Brent Venables has something for that and could shut down that the way he shut down J.T. Barrett? Fields is probably a little better passer than J.T. Barrett, and I'm not sure Dobbins might not be better than whoever else they had, whoever the running back was at that time. But I'm still not sold it with a good back seven and with a good scheme. You can't confuse Fields, and Fields might look like a one-dimensional player again.
How much of that is a sort of new age offensive system in a conference that is not necessarily all that equipped to defend not just the scheme, but the speed, right?
Right.
Like last week at this time, not sure if you listened to the ESPN podcast with Herb Street and David Pollock are the main sort of guests on there. And at this time last week, Pollock is saying, look, I watched film of the Wisconsin-Illinois game. He said, and the stuff that Illinois was doing, like zone read, things like that, I'm like, that's what Ohio State does. And his point, his thought going into the game was, look, this ain't going to be close because Ohio State just has superior athletes in space. And so how much of that is why we've seen them dominate so much against Big 12 and Big 10 opposition? And then how much is that then neutralized when come playoff time, they see the speed of not just a Clemson, but also an Alabama, for that matter. So I think your point is possibly.
But you have to have the speed to do it and the scheme to do it.
Yeah.
And what Brent Venables has done this year. I mean, did we miss on Clemson? I don't think so. But is Clemson different than we thought they'd be? I think so.
Yeah.
I would give Brent Venables in a semifinal. You're going to give him a month to prepare, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, to prepare for that. And I've got to think that it might not be 31-0 like you saw against Barrett. But I've got to think that he could confuse Justin Fields, make him one-dimensional again. And you still got to have the speed to shut down Dobbins and Fields in a running game. But does Clemson have that? Evidence right now shows that it wouldn't shock me if they really held Ohio State in check.
Yeah.
On the other side, though, Ohio State's different because their defense looks like they run really, really well.
Yeah.
I'm more impressed with their defense.
Yeah, it's funny, like, when Ohio State played Michigan State, they dominated the game, but they couldn't do anything against Michigan State's defense in the first quarter, okay? Like, they couldn't block them, and they were all disjointed. And then, of course, in the first quarter against Wisconsin, kind of a similar deal, Right. They were kind of struggling. And I hate to, you hate to just nitpick those the other side of that argument is, well, they played 6 really good quarters of dominating football, but you just wonder, like, when they go up against speed and scheme that is like as good as it gets, how things might be different.
You think that Michigan State and Wisconsin wore down, or you think that they made adjustments, or both?
I think possibly that, and then it's just a numbers game. Once you get to the outside, when you have when you're not blocking the defensive end, and you just keep hammering that, and it's such a space game, and you get Dobbins, you have to worry about that, and Fields. It's like Fields is the perfect. He's the perfect Urban Meyer quarterback. It's kind of the irony of that. Barrett wasn't that. I mean, you can imagine what Meyer would do with that type of guy who is a really good thrower and who obviously can do a lot with his legs as well.
I think he's accurate. I think that there was still a reason, and he was young at Georgia. Mm-hmm. I think that Day has given him a better chance to be successful. They put him in better spots. Mm-hmm. And I think that they basically give him half the field instead of the whole field. But I get this sentiment now. I read somewhere, here's some places like, well, Georgia made the mistake. They ran off the wrong quarterback. No, I don't think that's the case at all. There was a reason why Justin Fields didn't play last year. And in my mind, there's still his experience at quarterback and his ability to read defenses, and then what you can do, the different stuff you can show them, especially if you have time to prepare for them.
Yeah.
But you got to have the athletes too. And in my mind, I see Clemson in a potential Clemson-Ohio State semifinal game. I'd have a lot of confidence in Clemson's defense and Brent Venables' scheme to confuse and do what those teams did for a quarter, do it for 4 quarters.
Yeah. Okay, so, again, we're sitting here in late October, but whose defense would you take? LSU, Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson. Who? I
think in that order, I think Clemson has the best defense, Ohio State the second best defense. At times, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of difference in Alabama's and LSU's defense.
Okay.
I mean, let's remember LSU gave up 36 to Vanderbilt and to Texas. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I mean, Alabama's giving up chunks of yards against some bad offenses. So, who do you think's better? Who would you say that? I'm not obviously to me, Clemson and Ohio State are better than Alabama, LSU on defense. Mm-hmm. Do you think Ohio State's better than Clemson on defense?
I don't know.
I think pretty close.
See, I'm sort of thinking, who's going to have the best defense on December 28th? Not right now. And if we're comparing LSU and Alabama, I think it's going to be Alabama because they are growing up those linebackers. Right. Christian Harris is going to be another just freak of nature.
I agree.
Eventually, maybe late this year.
Right.
They're getting sort of continuity. They have more freaky talent, I think, than LSU has. Like when you see Terrell Lewis
in the front seven.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like Surtain and Trevon Diggs and McKinney. I mean, those.
Yeah, but man, LSU secondary. Delpit is.
That's true.
He's as good as it gets, and then the freshman corner, Stingley Jr.
Yeah,
I think Stingley Jr. is the best freshman cornerback I've seen in college football in years and years.
I think Alabama has the best upside in terms of this year, long term, because those guys are growing up. Terrell Lewis and Jennings are right now becoming like a really formidable edge duo as Lewis gets healthy and stays healthy.
You know what I think about those four defenses though, that all of them, if we count Saban as the defensive coordinator, all four of them have mastermind defensive minds.
Yeah.
I think that's the case. So
the crazy thing is, though, Mickey, this gets back to last year and how much, how vital it was that Clemson's defensive linemen, all came back last year. That's kind of an anomaly, and they're able to hold Alabama to that freaky, crazy offense of 16 points. Are we going to be looking now at much higher scoring games in the playoff and more entertaining? If that's the I don't think obviously a lot's going to change, but let's say that's the Final Four. Does Clemson have a good day defensively? Does Venables, quote unquote, disrupting Ohio State's offense instead of a goose egg a few years ago, is it holding them to 24?
Well, I think they would score against Clemson this time, yes.
Yeah, right.
But, I mean, look at the numbers. Clemson's defense is better this year in so many areas. Now, it's different, obviously. And who in their right mind would have thought that? And I'm not trying to tell you that Clemson's defensive line is better. But the defense, so far, the numbers are better across the board.
How many? I'm not disagreeing. How many good offenses has Clemson?
How many they played last year?
Yeah, true.
I mean, really, Alabama's a great one. Notre Dame was not a great offense. Pittsburgh was not. I mean, they did give up 500 yards passing to South Carolina. But last year, A&M, Syracuse with Dungy maybe a little bit. Yeah. Who did they face last year? You would go. Now Syracuse is not as good.
A&M's probably not as good because their offensive line and no Travion.
But North Carolina, I like their running game and I like the Howell. I think they got some playmakers at wide receiver. I don't think they played a bunch of great defenses last year. Look, you're right. I mean, if given anybody in the right mind would take last year's defensive line of that defense. But much like this, Larry, much like Ohio State's offense that lost all those pieces from last year. Yeah. The reason I didn't think Ohio State was going to be the best team in the country this year is their offensive line. They lost, 3 or 4 starters there. You lost a quarterback. You lost 3 wide receivers maybe. Dobbins was coming back, but there was a bunch of question marks there. But they recruited so well that you plug and play on that offense, and I think the same thing here. Now, Tyler Davis is better than we thought. And the back seven has played phenomenal. I mean, I get what you're saying. They've not run up against offensive juggernauts yet. But here's one way to look at it, too. Go back and look at what Clemson holds people under their average. Because
for sure.
I mean, that's apples to apples, isn't it?
Yeah.
Boston College. You can make fun of Boston College. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're a good team, okay? They were in the top 6 in the country, I think I'm not saying. They had one of the top 6 running games in the country.
And they had just run for 420 or whatever against
NC State.
NC State, pretty good defensive front.
Decent. Yeah, decent. Pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Above top half of the ACC.
Yeah.
So, in comparing offenses this year, last year, no. I mean, I get a little bit of that. But compared to what teams do against other defenses so far in the season and what they're doing against Clemson holds them underneath their average. How about that stat that nobody has 300 yards? And that's something that last year, if you think about it, A&M kind of embarrassed them in the second half a little bit. South Carolina embarrassed them for 2 or 3 quarters maybe.
Syracuse went up and down the field in the first half last year.
And we've not seen any of that this year.
You mentioned, and it's crazy. That stat is buried in the notes here, but I'm like, I did a double take last night when I was reading it. I knew that they had held 8 straight opponents to under 300 yards, but didn't know that since 2000, only the only teams that have done it, 2006 LSU and 2011 Alabama, and 2019 Clemson. That's crazy.
Those are like historical defenses.
Yeah. And then they did it after all they lost from last year.
That's why. Now I'll tell you this. Here's one reason why Clemson is better this year than last year on defense. And I use this phrase on offense all the time. On offense, they're multiple and they're balanced. And I never talk about balanced defenses.
Right.
But Clemson's multiple in defense, and we've seen it over the last 3 weeks. We saw odd man fronts. Mm-hmm. With Isaiah Simmons playing a deep center field and a 3 deep line. And you got guys, a guy on each side of the hash and Isaiah Simmons in the middle of the defense in a nickel and dime situations. And then the very next week, which you'll see this week against Wofford, 8-man, 9-man boxes and Isaiah Simmons close to the line and completely different scheme.
Yeah.
And Simmons is a big part of that, is that they're versatile enough and that they're multiple enough on defense that they're going to dictate to you sometimes.
Yeah.
And that, we talk about an offense all the time, but it's the most versatile defense I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. And the crazy thing is that coming into the year, going into that A&M game in the second game, I picked up a distinct vibe from over there that there was some concern. Mm-hmm. And I think Dabo has even mentioned this in recent weeks that they thought they were going to have some hiccups defensively in the second and third games.
Up front,
just giving up some points.
Yeah,
because they, it's the vibe that they didn't know Syracuse was going to be that bad, but they had to go to Syracuse,
right?
And face a Babers coached offense. So you're thinking, okay, that's going to be a tough task, and so. The feeling was our offense better be ready to score some points. That was the vibe I had going into that game, into the A&M game.
And they thought they would.
Yeah.
And they thought they scored more than 24.
Yeah, right. And they held A&M to 3 points, basically, throwing out that garbage
Think about
time.
this for a second. Think about this. What did A&M do against Alabama?
They scored 28 points.
And 400 yards of offense.
Yeah.
What did A&M do against the offseason? We heard about this great Auburn defensive line.
Yeah.
Davidson and Brown, NFL first-round picks, Kevin Steele. Remember early in the season how great they were supposed to be? What did Auburn do? I mean, what did A&M do against Auburn's defense?
They scored 20 points.
Yeah, but
they were down big at half, weren't they?
Yeah, but it still was 20, I thought maybe 23. But they scored, they had over like
380 or something yards, I think.
So against great SEC defenses that tackle so well, like I saw on your Twitter today, what did they do against them? And then they scored 3 points in 59 minutes against Clemson.
I swear it's what I'm fascinated about, and I wrote about this week, is how many times have we heard Dabo over the years when people ask him, what's the explanation for this great defense? And he's like, it's pretty simple. It starts on the line of scrimmage. The closer you are to the line of scrimmage, the more important you are. And of course, from 14 to 18, that was what it was all based on. But you have all those guys leave, and not just those guys, but Kendall Joseph and Trey Lamar and J.D. Davis, others. And they've been able to build it on the back seven, which happens to be the best back seven Dabo says he's been saying over and over that he's ever had. I don't think that you can build it on the back seven if you have a defensive coordinator that is not as much, doesn't have the genius that Venables has to throw out what they threw out against A&M. Totally spooked Kellen Mond from the opening snap because he thinks he's going to get the looks he got last year in College Station. You think that middle to deep middle passing, those windows are going to be there, which they just hammered last year, and then you look out there and you think Isaiah Simmons is going to be over here, and he's in center field with two other
safeties. Wallace, who was in the back end last year, is playing closer to the line of scrimmage more now.
Yeah, so what do you do? And your offensive line is not as good. Your running backs aren't as good, and so he was totally disheveled in that game. And so now, now they're in a different spot. Here we are in late October. And you mentioned this a minute ago. People just want to dismiss, Boston College is terrible. We can't learn anything from that. That's crap. Louisville's offense, I watched them a good bit going into that Clemson game. And I'm not saying that they're Alabama or Clemson, but they are hard to defend. And for Clemson to just ball those guys up the way they did, and then against Boston College in a grown man type of game where you better buckle your dang chin straps. I mean, they really didn't even. I mean, I expected to see Dylan bust some runs, here and there. It did not happen.
No.
And this defensive line, the more you watch them, the more they're starting to sort of bear that kind of trademark of establishing a new line of scrimmage. And it's, I don't want to say it's crazy or anything like that because these are talented guys. Yeah. They've been recruiting really well. But to see Logan Rudolph at 240-something pounds right at home against a 6'5", whatever, 320-pound offensive tackle, not only holding his own, but setting the edge and making disruptive plays, that's remarkable after just given what they lost.
Foster, I think, is in the system, smart kid, and physical enough to do it. I think Jordan Williams has grown up a little bit. We've seen that a little bit. Before the injury, Xavier Kelly was playing a lot more snaps in some key moments earlier. He gains a little trust in the staff. Niles Pinckney's playing his best football by far. Mm-hmm. The staff did. I noticed it before, but I didn't notice to the point where then I went back and looked at it because Dabo's going to tell you the truth, and Venables is going to tell you the truth most of these times, and they talked about that. But when you go back and watch the replay, I watch the game live, and I go back and watch it on TV just for the presentation part of it and see, watch the ball a lot. And then the third time I watch it every week, I watch the lines of scrimmage. And Tyler Davis squares up, plays with shoulders square to the line of scrimmage, and uses his hands unbelievably well, and discards the offensive lineman, and he makes plays, and he is a huge surprise. The other thing they do defensively, we was talking about that, where Wallace is playing coastal line of scrimmage a lot. Muse has gotten better in coverage at times, and I'm a big Nolan Turner fan. We talked about that last time we were here. Finally, outside of some early issues at linebacker, since about the second or third game of the year, they've tackled really, really well in space. And Kendrick is great tackling in space. A.J. Terrell, we kind of knew Terrell was anyway. They don't bust coverages. They don't miss big tackles for huge plays. And Skalski, I think, is having a solid year. I think Smith's coming on. Yeah. And he's tackling a lot better than he was at the beginning of the year. But they're – and they still got room to grow. I mean, Xavier Thomas hadn't played in the last couple of weeks. But – I don't care who you are. Scheme's great, speed's great, all that. But you still got to get a guy on the ground. And I think this defense tackles really, really well.
Big supporter of the Clemson Dubcast is Harris Flooring America. Based in Anderson, South Carolina, Harris Flooring has been instrumental in a lot of the facilities transformation you've seen on Clemson's campus lately. From the Allen Reeves Center to the McFadden Building to Memorial Stadium to the Neary Center. Family owned and operated since 1947. The owner, Scott Junkins, big Clemson guy. Harris Flooring is just as good inside the home and the residential realm as they are with the larger scale commercial stuff. Give them a call, 864-642-6183 or online at flooringamerica-anderson.com. If you run a business that conducts credit card transactions with customers, you got to learn about Tandem Payment. Credit Card Processing Company has offices throughout the Southeast, but the one in Greenville in the Upstate, headed up by a 2005 Clemson grad. Tandem's technology allows business owners to offset their credit card processing costs by applying a small customer service charge to each sale they make. Tandem has an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and was awarded the Better Business Integrity Award in 2013. Check them out at tandempayment.com.
I would, Chad Smith, he's still, at least to me, I could be totally off, in my take, but still a little slow to react.
I see that.
On the touchdown, the draw to
he was
Jalen.
not. That was a weird deal, and I don't know who had what gap right there, because if you think Davis went one way, I think it was Foster at the end that kind of went the other, and it was kind of a three-man front maybe anyway, or they shaded it, whatever. And he did not fit the right gap in there. He was slow to get over there, yes.
Yeah.
100%. And it was a great play call, too. 100% there. But he's getting better, I feel like. Now, on the other side of that, I think Balin Spector
I was just about to mention his name.
is going to be a really good football player here.
Yeah.
Now, think about this, though. I'm always thinking about the future. Think about when Brissy and Capehart and Murphy and maybe Flo and maybe Birch, you're going to see a completely different look again, like that old defensive line you had the last few years, to match up maybe with some back seven guys and the way they're recruiting there. And then, Brent Venables. Remember we talked about how, and Paul Streeler talks about this a lot. Like at safety, you can cover some deficiencies back there.
Yeah.
If you're good in the front four, there's not going to be any deficiencies in the future.
Yeah.
So you get him a whole deck of cards rather than him having to. Because don't you think he's still kind of piecing the thing together a little bit and having to make up for some issues a little bit.
Is it safe to say that and it sounds crazy, this notion sounds crazy, but given all the stuff, all the talent they lost on defense from last year, and given what's coming in, and given how many of these young guys up front who are playing now are going to be developed by next year, is it safe to say that the old adage, if you're going to get them, you better get them this year?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Defensively, especially now. Again, Simmons does so much, man. You got a game plan for him, and you got to find him every play. And he's been so disruptive. He'll be gone, and that would be very difficult to replace. But they don't lose any other defensive linemen. And they bring in the best defensive line class that you've seen, and these guys are going to play as freshmen. Mm-hmm. I think Flo's going to play right away if you can get him. A.J. Terrell, do you think is gone, correct?
Yeah.
All right, so that's where Goodrich and Booth, and Fred Davis comes in and might play.
Sheridan Jones.
Sheridan Jones, yeah, absolutely, and you still got Kendrick on the other side. I mean, there'll be some safety stuff there. Turner comes back, but I'm impressed with Zanders. I'm impressed with Charleston. I'm impressed with those young guys, Thornton, and those young guys back there, and they're taking some time there. There'll be some growing pains, but no, I feel like they'll be more dominant, at least physically, next year up front. That's got to be the best defensive line in the country maybe next year.
When Simmons and Muse and Wallace decided to come back last January, did you think it was going to be as big as it has become?
No. I did not think, and it's a great question. Wallace, to me, is the guy that makes some plays but busts some coverages.
Yeah.
Muse was a guy that I thought was limited. Great run support guy, but limited in the back end. And in coverage. And Simmons was a guy that always seemed like to me was this great, unbelievable physical specimen, but to bust out and couldn't depend on him as much. As it turns out, Wallace looks more comfortable closer to the line of scrimmage and covering slot guys and having the responsibility on that back end. It seemed like to me he's playing underneath more. Mm-hmm. Muse, I think, has improved his coverage skills a little bit, his recognition of routes and all that a little bit more. He's not out of place near as much. He's still not a great cover guy. So, but it looks like to me he's more prepared in route recognition and all that now. And then Simmons, if not for Chase Young, is the best defensive player in the country. Mm-hmm. Again, you better account for him. He's going to be off the edge. Is he going to be, last week they ran that more of a 4-3 look, and he was an inside linebacker.
Yeah.
And we've seen him at safety, free safety, back there in the middle of the field playing center field and coming on blitzes. And then, one thing that he has done, Venables being he's going to disrupt the quarterback.
Yeah.
He's going to affect the quarterback. And he's having to do it a little bit. He's always going to do it with linebackers too. Even last year we had those 4 defensive linemen. He's gonna do it with linebackers too, but he's doing it more with corners. It seems like with safeties and off the edge and guys that way. It seems like he's and the defensive line when in a 3-man front, those ends aren't quite as split out. They don't quite the pass rush responsibilities that they would. So he's having to do it different ways, but the personnel's got to do it. I mean, Wallace looks good coming off the edge, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And Simmons looks good coming off the edge. And those 2 corners, I like AJ and I like DK coming off the edge. So he's doing it in different ways, but they're affecting quarterbacks still.
How crazy is it that in 17 with Dorian O'Daniel, he was an excellent Sam linebacker.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, they have somebody who can stay on the field regardless of whether it's pass or run. That's extraordinary.
No doubt.
And then here comes another guy who can not only do that, but Venables told me last week he has never had a player line up in as many spots all over the field. It's amazing that, that they're able to, at one position, just when you say goodbye to Dorian O'Daniel, and man, that's a big loss. Here comes Simmons, who takes it to a whole other level.
Don't you think Simmons is what Curse should have been?
Yeah. Although Curse was always a little too stiff.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
Simmons is just so almost like a Gumby type.
Yeah.
I get. Is that a good
flexibility. I mean,
comparison? Yeah.
he turns and does all. All right. Here's a question then. We have seen Dabo.
Let me. I just want to interrupt.
Yeah.
Hold that thought.
Sure.
Dabo brought up that 15 defense earlier this week when I asked him, how extraordinary is it that you have you're playing great defense and it's built on a back 7 instead of a defensive line, and he says, well, it all goes hand in hand. He said because we had a great defensive line in 2015, but we were dysfunctionally good because of the back end. We couldn't. We were getting beat over the top left and right, including the national championship game, and so it's interesting to think about that. Like now you have a secondary that has it all locked down, and a pretty good defensive line, and and the result is better.
The game has changed so much, and I heard Muschamp talk about it the other day that you'd rather have the NFL people talk about this because the ball's coming out quicker now. That you'd rather have good interior pass rushers. You got to get in his face, because the edge guys it takes so long, and the ball's coming out faster. So you can scheme against great speed rushing defensive ends now.
Yeah.
The other part of it is that, and I think you and I have talked about this before on my show and on this podcast, is that because the game is so spread out, horizontally and vertically, that you better be great in space now. And you can be as dominant as you want to be up front. I mean, you still got to run the football, obviously, and you got to have so many things that you do well up front. But I think you better play well in space, and that means that back 7, tackling, getting the guys on the ground. I don't care how good you are up front. If the ball is on those quick slants that Alabama does, you're not going to sack Tua. Mm-hmm. On all the horizontal game that everybody throws it out wide, and gets out there, you better be physical and you better be able to attack. You better be able to tackle. Mm-hmm. And if you give me a choice now, I thought I'd never say this. If you give me a choice now, being great in the front 4 or great in the back 7 in today's game, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to sit here and tell you it's still one of the line of scrimmage, and it is. But offenses can do things to negate your defensive line now.
Oh, it's like defending a fast break in basketball.
Yeah.
Like you want guys who are good in all across the court, right? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes all sense. Let me ask you quickly.
Yeah. What were you going to say before I interrupted you?
You know how Dabo turns all these branding opportunities that he does. And they've done it with C.J. Spiller, done it with Deshaun Watson, done it in the wide receiver U and quarterback U. Do you think now that there is a Isaiah Simmons prototype that you now go out there and you tell these 6'4" freak athletes, whatever, we want you to be the next Isaiah Simmons? Can they turn that into a recruiting tool?
Guys that Arkansas is offering as receivers?
Yeah. And Nebraska,
Arkansas didn't think he could be a DB?
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess the answer to that.
Or is he just so freaky that
that's
God
what I was
going to
say. God doesn't. But that doesn't mean you can't recruit off of it.
Yeah.
Right.
There might be one out there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, like, I mean, when Venables has been around a long time. He was at Oklahoma for 13 years, had some freaky good players there, and when he can't think of a player, similar player, that's the more of a testament to Simmons.
With that said,
else.
though, the thing that Venables has proven now is that if you have the freak in a Dexter Lawrence or a freak in a Christian Wilkins, then we'll play to that strength.
Yeah.
If it's Vic Beasley, then we'll play to that strength. Or if it's now maybe a Justin Flo, then we'll play to that strength. Whatever you need to do, wherever that, much like the best. And I always think about offense this way: the best offensive coordinators are the guys that get the ball in the hands of their playmakers more often in different ways.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm thinking about it, and I've never thought about it defensively. Is the guys that can get your playmaker, your 1, 2, whatever it might be, in those positions more often, and so it's almost like it's a weapon on defense, and really it's a rarity because he's a weapon at all three levels. And I don't know if I've ever seen it at all three levels.
That reminds me, in I guess the spring of 2018, after Simmons made the move to Sam from safety, replacing O'Daniel. We're asking him about the transition and what's different, and what he said that at the time that I remember now, he said that position, Coach V designs it to funnel plays to you, and that's exactly what you're just.
Think about this. There was a time in there early where, and because that Sam before O'Daniel and before Simmons, Sam's coming off the field an awful lot when you're playing nickel.
Right.
Was there a time in your mind where you thought, all right, Muse and Simmons are safeties. Boy, it looks like Muse can make the move to linebacker, and Simmons looks more like a safety rather than the exact opposite.
I mean, heck, people were saying it going into this year about Muse.
Yeah.
He needs to move to linebacker. Or I think I even said during the offseason, I mean, I didn't say this should happen, but I said, hey, this tight end stuff, like with Galloway being ineligible, Garrett Williams leaving.
You just didn't know his brother be a starting tight end in South Carolina.
Oh man! So I don't follow recruiting closely. So Clemson did not offer him.
No, transfer.
So why weren't they interested in him?
Transfers, man. They don't take transfers.
Man,
he's a good-looking Jesse, isn't he?
He'd be pretty darn good right now, right here.
Yeah.
Very interesting. But to answer your question, I said maybe Muse could move to H-back or something, during this past offseason if it got a really, if the situation were really dire. But no, I always saw Simmons as that, curse 2.0, who could.
Because and Dabo talked about this in one of the press conferences earlier, and you might have asked him about it, where he said, as a freshman, and he might be talking about Xavier Thomas compared to him now, but as a freshman, or redshirt freshman.
Yeah.
That, he was there and there were signs. And obviously you see his 200-meter times or whatever. You see his size. That you can see that. But he wasn't mature enough or experienced enough where it's all coming together now in the film study and the recognition, all that happens. I'll tell you a quick story. I know you had Dr. Harder on.
Yeah.
Who's one of my favorite people on earth. Here. And Dr. Harder was still giving physicals when Isaiah Simmons first got here.
I heard this one too, yeah.
And did he talk about it on something's podcast?
He didn't, but I heard that.
He said that, you're a freshman? Yeah, so what are you, defensive end? He goes, no, so I'm a safety. He's like, Dr. Harder said, well, I know we're going to be doing defense for years if our safeties like defensive ends now.
Well, I remember with Curse, it was like, I guess his last 2 years, it was like, man, they're going to be able to move him around so much and play him all over the place. He's going to be able to come off the edge. That never really materialized to a great extent. He did some of it, but Simmons is that guy that
you have to be disciplined and you have to be mature to do it. And I'm not. It's a shot at Curse is still in the NFL.
Yeah,
we got some trouble the other day but Curse is a talent,
right?
But Burton Burns told me this one time. I remember we were down in Atlanta maybe, and Mark Ingram was about to play a bunch, and I was like, what's it, Ingram? You got his other backs. And I was asking about some other 5-star guys he had or whatever. And he goes, guys mature at different rates, and it's a lot about maturity rather than, what can you handle, and your responsibility, your accountability. And now it has been a progression. Have you seen it, freshman to sophomore to junior year, that he's more dependable. He doesn't bust out near as much. Even last year, there were times where, man, just bite, take the play fake.
Like the South Carolina game.
Yeah.
As recently as that.
Yeah. And then they picked on him downfield. The Shi Smith, he couldn't cover Shi Smith, I think, on one of the touchdowns last year. Yeah,
he
there
was
was
a
just
mess.
times. Yeah.
But then Pitt, Notre Dame,
Yeah.
Alabama was just lights out.
Yeah. But it's a process, and everybody matures at different times. But it seems to me he's gotten a lot more serious about it, or at least on paper. And I think that one, Brent talked about that.
Yeah. Crazy stat. So Clemson has allowed 8 non-garbage. 8 garbage. I'm sorry. They gave up 3 touchdowns to North Carolina. Those are the only well, I guess BC would have to be included as a non-garbage time because it was 17-0. So, yeah. Anyway, so 8 touchdowns that they have allowed other than that North Carolina game. Mm-hmm. And the deficit that Clemson had established before the touchdown was scored, 17 against BC, right? Clemson was up 17-0. Clemson was up 35 at Louisville when Louisville scored its lone touchdown. Clemson was up 42 to FSU. Clemson was up 38 to FSU, 21 to A&M, 35 to Georgia Tech, 42 to Georgia Tech, and 42 to Charlotte. That's just so that's 8 touchdowns, or 7
garbage time.
Total garbage time. Right.
Yeah.
3 touchdowns in the first half they've allowed all year.
Do you think Clemson fans now? First, when Venables got here and Dabo said we want to play more players, and Brent didn't want to do it, but I want to play more players, and we're going to get these guys ready to play. A, they deserve to play, and B, we're going to be better when we do graduate like 5 great defensive linemen like we did last year. We understand it now, and I think Clemson fans get that. Clemson fans also get that we're not going to play our best football in September. It's a building process. The guys won 2 out of 3 national championships. Do you think that the national media, I know David Hale's done a great job of presenting this case, that the national media needs to understand that because Lamar Jackson looks great in September against Charlotte and whoever else he blew out, that Louisville, Syracuse that year, whatever, that's not the end all. That you don't win the September championships. The national media needs to change the way we view Dabo Sweeney coach football teams.
It is really dumb, and I don't want to include everybody. Just saying national media means, I think it means assorted voices. And then some AP poll voters too, obviously. Yeah. And I don't know really what it is. I remember the day after the Louisville game, I'm listening to Sirius XM College. And I hear Barrett Saley, who's a nice guy. I mean, I've been on his show before. He goes, LSU really showed me at Mississippi State that they're a complete team because their defense just shut Mississippi State down. And I'm like, are you what? Really? What's the logic here? That's what a week after Florida went up and down the field in Baton Rouge. That's all it takes for you to be sold on. And then
about 3 weeks after Vanderbilt scored 36 on you, and about 5 weeks after Texas put up 36 on you.
Yeah. And then another guy says, he's on with Tom Luganbill. I forgot his name, and he goes, Clemson is clearly not a top 4 team. And so then this narrative develops just sort of as an example going out of the Louisville game that Clemson had a bad half at Louisville. Well, first of all, the offense had a bad quarter,
right? Because
Trevor Lawrence threw those picks, but they had a pretty good second quarter. They had 2 long drives, 17-3.
Okay,
and then there's this other thing called defense, in which Clemson totally balled up.
And there's this other thing called second half too.
And so, but anyway, they at worst they didn't have a bad half; they had half of a bad half.
Right.
So I don't know. And then that same, let's see, was this the same night I watch Alabama, Tennessee, and I don't know if you watched that game.
I watched every bit of it. And I read what you wrote about it, and you're 100% right. That game was in the balance.
They were on the ropes.
Yes.
And anybody watching that game would have a hard time.
Post 2 was injury.
Right, yes. Post 2 was injury.
Now, and I maintain that had Tennessee's quarterback not got hurt, it'd have been different. But you can't look. Both quarterbacks got hurt. I got it. A couple penalties, a couple of the turnover on there. It's a completely different game. Alabama was reeling, and the roughing the passer, late hit, whatever target, whatever that was, and then the turnover and some of those. That was a completely different football game.
Yeah, and so So, like, the average voter simply looks at that score, 35-13. Up, same old. Alabama pulled away. They didn't struggle. I mean, even the lead AP college football writer, Ralph Russo, who's a great guy. I mean, he's been on the podcast. He's a friend. He was on Twitter, and somebody said Alabama struggled, blah blah blah, and then he responded and says, they struggled, really?
Yeah, they did.
And then I responded, yes, they did. Like, if you watch the game. So anyway, I think I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think the legitimate gripe that Dabo or Clemson fans have, it's not that, they hate Clemson or anything like that. It's just like a double standard. Like, they're not, like, they're taking the magnifying glass to Clemson and saying, ooh, what's wrong with those picks? And that's the only thing you see on SportsCenter.
How about the guy who says, the ESPN character who says, well, now the blueprint for beating Trevor Lawrence is out. You just got to drop 8.
Right. Yeah.
To myself, I'm saying, okay, let's drop 8, play a zone, and just let him sit back there and pick you apart. Yeah. And let him run sometimes.
And then let Travis Etienne run against 5-man
that's great there. And also, no one's been able to do it yet, so you figure that out.
Quick word about Uptown Realty LLC, headed up by Patrick Inzer, former sports writer who decided to get into the real estate game. Uptown Realty, locally owned and operated out of Sumter, but they serve the Eastern Midlands and PD area with the buying and selling of homes, commercial properties, and land. They also offer affordable new housing in the mid 130,000s from a local custom builder. Patrick is the sole owner and broker in charge. Grew up in Anderson, going to Clemson games, been in Sumter for 15 years, loyal Tiger Illustrated subscriber, loyal Dubcast listener. Website is uptownrealtysc.com. A great friend of the Clemson Dubcast and winner of the Clemson Area Chamber of Commerce Business of the Year Award, Founders Federal Credit Union. If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers, and all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership, as well as IPTAY members. Matt Gross is a proud Clemson alum and the vice president for the Clemson market for Founders Federal Credit Union. Membership at Founders has many benefits: great rates on loans and savings products, advice on investments and insurance products, and even a Clemson debit card available for any Founders member with a checking account. Founders Federal Credit Union is federally insured by the NCUA. If you're in Clemson, stop by and see Matt and his staff at 680 Old Greenville Highway, Suite 300, right next to the Walmart Neighborhood Market.
You rewatched the Boston College game. That was a really persistent theme with the announcer. You could tell they had sat with Dabo on Friday, and he had sort of not given them the business or anything, but just complained, sort of. And they kept saying it's about track record and credibility. And I think that's where he sits. Like, and he said this on his show the other night. He goes, you know what? He says, we've been to the playoff. We've won 2 national titles. We've been pretty good the last however many years. You would think this staff knows when we're playing well and when we're on the right track. And that track record, that credibility, I think there's a legitimate gripe there that people are just sort of, maybe some people are dismissing.
I think Dabo has that chip. I think the Florida State game, we saw him on the top of the hill for the Florida State game.
Yes.
I think that was the first time we saw it. They played great at Louisville, and then the Boston College game. I'm going to make a crazy statement right now. Of the games that I have watched this year, and I've seen a bunch of Alabama games, a bunch of LSU games, a bunch of Ohio State games, a little less of Ohio State. I've seen the Michigan State game, the Wisconsin game, and parts of other Ohio State games. Penn State I've seen as much as Ohio State. Maybe a little bit more Penn State. Some of the schedule may be a little more difficult. All the Oklahomas and Georgias, I've seen Georgia every one of the games, whatever. I didn't watch Arkansas State and all that, but I've seen enough.
Mm-hmm.
And again, taking everything into account, I think Clemson on both sides of the ball looked better against Boston College than any other team has looked in any other game this season. Phil still does this score for every game, like a game score in which you get a certain percentage or whatever.
Yeah.
Am I right by saying that was the biggest yardage differential in ACC football history?
Yeah.
And I don't think Boston College is great. I'm not trying to sell you that. I'm just trying to say that what they represent, Clemson looked better on both sides of the football than any football team I've seen this year.
Is
that crazy?
No. It was a lot like the NC State game last year.
Yes. It came together and they played great.
Yeah, it all came together. A lot of people sort of doubting them or whatever, and then they just blew their doors off.
All right. I know you want to talk about those stuff, those other teams, but Ohio State, they beat Wisconsin. I think it's a good matchup for Ohio State, like you mentioned. Outside of that, their best win was Indiana.
Cincinnati.
Well, I mean, how would Louisville and North Carolina and Boston College do against Cincinnati and Indiana?
That's a good question.
They would compete, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
All right. Alabama's best win this year is probably A&M.
That's it.
Yeah. What's Alabama's second best win?
Just in terms of like margin of victory and sort of decisiveness, maybe at South Carolina.
Yeah, how would South Carolina do against Louisville? We know they did against North Carolina, right? And so that combined with the idea of, didn't you think Oklahoma and Georgia were in that elite national championship hunt? Probably still are if they went out, but didn't you think they were better before they lost, obviously?
Oklahoma did not surprise me nearly as much because I thought their defense still had some cracks.
Right.
I was not sold on their defense. And honestly, not totally sold on Jalen Hurts being a superstar type, distributor, whatever. I was really surprised at Georgia. Although, and it's always hindsight, you think back to that Georgia-Notre Dame game.
They didn't look great.
They did not look good in that game.
I maintain, and Georgia fans got mad at me on my show. I kept saying Georgia had an opportunity because all summer long we talked about it. They could send a message. Dabo says, leave no doubt. Georgia left doubt at the Notre Dame game. Great win, and you'd hope, you want to escape, and that's great.
Yeah.
Against Kentucky, Georgia left doubt. And obviously at South Carolina, they left doubt. But my point through that is Clemson's paying a price right now for the North Carolina game.
Right.
But don't you know that Georgia and Oklahoma would love to pay that same price? That you can doubt me all you want to. It's a long season, man. They didn't play well there. But I think they're paying to continue to drop in the polls. And Indiana too, Larry. How about this? As LSU, that win at Texas doesn't look great.
No.
I watched them against Mississippi State like you. The Florida game was a really good football game. At home at night, Florida's better than I thought they were, and that's a good, solid win. What would Clemson do to Florida in Death Valley?
I wonder if people are not only looking at the schedules to date, they're going ahead, and I don't think it's a terrible mistake, but they're going ahead and projecting, like they're looking at Clemson's schedule from this point forward.
That's fine.
And say, and Clemson likely will enter the playoff. It's very possible, having played 13 games and not a ranked team among them.
Fair.
And so, which, again, Alabama and Clemson's schedule to date, very comparable.
But let's see how Alabama does against that.
Yeah.
And like you said, the linebacker, the freshman linebacker, he's going to be a great player. And maybe Alabama does put it together. Maybe Tua. I'm fascinated by this. We don't have Tua excuse, and we got a mulligan now against LSU. Maybe we'll see how that works out. But yeah, and that point in time, let's judge it then. But boy, we have judged Clemson differently. And I'll tell you this, and this is so you don't think my Boston College statement about looking better than any other team looked in any game this year?
I don't have any. Okay. I can't disagree with that.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to throw one more crazy one at you. When we talked about this thing in the summer, I think Trevor Lawrence is amazing. I wouldn't trade for anybody in the country. I'm a little bit skeptical because the best player doesn't win the trophy every single year. Yeah. And I knew that Dabo would be holding back. Like in the end, in the beginning, the Vegas odds were for Trevor to throw something like 24 touchdowns, 28 touchdowns,
right.
Whatever it is. Like, he's going to throw for 60, whatever. And then you think about it, well, no, Dabo's going to run it, and they're going to take him out of games. I get all that. So, but I was with you on like these pie in the sky, man, these almost too lofty goals to ever succeed at. But I'll tell you this, and maybe, and you might think I'm crazy. After this past Saturday with Boston College, and just watching Alabama's defense and no running game, watching LSU's defense a little bit, and I still worry about the running game a little bit, and knowing what Brent Venables might be able to do to Justin Fields, but before I say that, let me say, is Fields better than Jalen Hurts, or is they the same player?
Boy, I haven't even thought of it that way.
I think they're the same player to me.
Could be, because I think Hurts, I've always believed Hurts is a better passer than a lot of people criticize him for when he was at Alabama. People say, he can't even throw a forward pass. He's just a running back. No. He's a good pass, not a great, good. Which is about what Fields is right now.
Right.
I think.
Right. All right. So, but my original point, going back to it, is as lofty of what we said we thought Clemson and Alabama would be, like we originally started the conversation now. I might feel better because Clemson's defense is better than we thought. And because the offense looked better, man, that check down game looked better, the underneath stuff looked better, the over the middle stuff looked better, the horizontal stuff looked so much better. The offensive line's playing at a high level now. Trevor's getting some confidence now. I might be more confident now than I was in Clemson's chances than I was in preseason.
You're I'm not saying you're off, but you're in a distinct minority because out there it's like there's still this air, even among some Clemson fans. Well, I want to ask you, what is it? Well, hold on. First, this past Monday, we talked about Clemson being penalized for the North Carolina win. It was almost like it was a loss. When Oklahoma lost to Kansas State, it was like a number of national voices were in a rush to say they can still make the playoff. Don't which is true, right? But it was like almost a rush to defend them a little bit, And then there was a guy on the Sirius channel on Monday who said, "Look, guys, Oklahoma, they just had a bad game, and in fact they just had a bad 2 quarters, and it was so you hear so it goes from." I don't want to make it sound like I'm buying into this persecution complex to the nth degree, but it's just kind of funny that a week or so after you hear, but Clemson had a bad half at Louisville in a 35-point win. You hear Oklahoma, which looked like total dog do for a lot of that game, and they just and they lost the game.
Yeah, and lost the game.
Crap, I forgot. Oh, I wanted to ask you, what has it been like? Sort of in hindsight. The sentiment and the mood of the Clemson fan base, both the callers and the text line and all that. I know I've heard you at various points briefly just sort of saying, people, these are good times. You're having to remind people to sort of savor the moment and all that. What has it been like? Are you surprised? I mean, does it feel like some people are getting spoiled earlier than you thought they would be, just in terms of I don't want to say, you can't really get a consensus, but just a general sort of take on that element of fan?
I am surprised that it's not worse.
Okay.
Because Trevor's going to win 8 Heisman trophies, and Clemson's going to win 14 consecutive national championships. And if Trevor ever throws for interception, then we're really going to be mad around here. So it hadn't been quite that. And I think here's why. I think that, again, Clemson – let me ask you the question this way, and then I'm going to get to the point of answer. What's the second worst game Clemson's played this year? We all agree North Carolina, they didn't play well. What's their second worst performance of the year?
I would say Syracuse.
Okay. What was the score of the game?
41-6.
Okay, 41-6 on the road in the Carrier Dome is their second worst game of the year. So if we're in the hierarchy of complaining. Yeah. I was going to say the B word, but I'm going to say complaining. Your second biggest gripe this year is a 41-6 win at Syracuse.
Yeah.
All right. So if that's the case, then no, they don't have anything to complain about. Now, the North Carolina game, there were some people that says, what's wrong with our offense? It's a play calling. We've done some things. And there were some legitimate gripes through some of that. But the reason why it's less than I thought is because the chip is now back, and it's almost like the media has done them a favor, because every single week they win, and every single week they drop in the polls. Yeah. So it has been this. Clemson fans have been able to rally behind a national disrespect. It's almost like I can talk about my family, but boy, you talk about my family, I'm coming after you. And so now the inside noise of not playing up to your potential against North Carolina is legitimate. But when you start talking about the outside noise of 35-7 against Louisville, and I will defend my people now.
Yeah.
So I've not heard the Clemson fan base. How's it been on the message boards?
Fine. I think in general, I'm not going to say spoiled, but everybody knows they're supposed to just roll through this schedule. It's almost like the full attention and intensity is going to come.
They know it's coming
in the playoffs.
But here's the deal. the way I would classify Clemson fans on my show and text line and Twitter, and then on your boards, what I read is they're almost a little bit bored.
Right. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. We know. I mean, Clemson's going to beat Wofford. They're 47-point favorites. They're going to beat Wofford. And then they're going to go to NC State, and they're going to be about a 28-point favorite. And even though it's a night game, can you imagine a night game in Raleigh and you go, 28 points? And then they're going to come home and Wake Forest is going to be ranked, and it's going to be about a 24-point spread, and they're going to win that one. And they go down to Columbia, about a 17-point favorite, win that one by 3 touchdowns. In the ACC championship, they're going to be 3. So my point is that all year long, double-digit favorites, that they feel a little bit bored with it. Now, you and I and Paul, and I think a lot of your listeners, a lot of your readers, I should say, we follow recruiting so much that I'm still very, very interested. I'm interested in Ngata, and I'm interested in Davis Allen, and I'm interested in Ches Malusi and Mikey Dukes, and I'm interested in Spector
I'm
and
interested
all these
in a
guys.
great football team.
Yes, yes.
I watch every Alabama game just because I'm interested in a filthy talented machine. Right. That's why I love watching
and the
Clemson
progression
football too.
because you know what I'm, and this sounds, I'm more interested in than I am the Wofford game is spring practice at Clemson.
Right.
Man, this is crazy, but this spring, DJ Uiagalelei is going to be here, and Brian Bresee is going to be here, and Miles Murphy is going to be here, and Fred Davis. I don't know who these early enrollers. I got to go back and look at it again. But to me, and what Tiger Illustrated is going, you're going to follow spring like y'all always do, and it's going to be great. But that's more interesting than a football game in the fall.
Right.
And now, if you're a Pittsburgh fan or a Virginia fan, you're trying to win the division, you're going, man, this is a huge game for us. Well, spring football at Clemson is more interesting than this week's game or last week's game.
What's the okay, this gets to your point. When as a fan, on game day of a game with real suspense, there's like a feeling you have of nervousness and tension. When's the last time you had that? Was it A&M? You didn't feel that against A&M? Okay, well, when's the last time the average Clemson fan had that feeling of, I don't know how this is going to go? I mean, okay.
San Jose?
Other than, I'm sorry, regular season. Has to be regular season because we're talking about the suspense list of the regular season.
Not any time last year.
Not at A&M? Not really.
No?
Not really. 17 at South Carolina?
What was the spread? Do we know? That was a 16?
Yeah.
No, I didn't think South Carolina's going.
At NC State, 17.
No. I mean,
I went in thinking they were going to have trouble. Yeah.
And they did. I mean, it was a fairly close football game, wasn't it?
Oh, heck yeah. That was the laptop game. That was 38-31 where they had to, it was the Kayvon Wallace PBU at the end.
Yeah. I'll tell you this. I don't know the last time I put an awful lot of faith, and even if it goes bad early, and even if Clemson loses the game, the Alabama Sugar Bowl game, I felt like, now again, that game was different because I didn't think Kelly Bryant could throw the ball downfield and get the guys out of the box. But in the third quarter, when they got the turnover and they held the field goal, in my mind, I was thinking, you know what, Tony Ellett, Jeff Scott, and Brent Venables, they got this. They'll figure out something. And then Alabama was, going in that game, though, I talked to a guy that was very close to Alabama's program, and he was telling me, man, we're in shambles. If you remember that, like, there was a lot of talk about that. And their defense, their opening kickoff and the defense set that tone there. But even in that game, I can't remember a game. I mean, you got to go back to, maybe the game out in the desert, the national championship game. Man, maybe even the Oklahoma game before that. My wife has a video of me getting excited at the Oklahoma game.
Yeah.
And she makes fun of me for doing it. That's the only time she's ever seen me really excited. And I was saying, well, there was some doubt about going to that one. And then in the desert. But since the desert and that win, I felt like Clemson's going to win every game.
Okay.
And they have it. They've lost twice since then, right?
Yeah, and I'm not saying
three times.
saying a lack of confidence. I'm saying going in nervous, a little bit nervous.
A little bit of butterflies.
A little butterflies.
Did you have that at Auburn, Deshaun's senior year?
It being so early, it's kind of like you don't really know. So yeah, sort of, probably. Sort of, but
his
no,
junior
but
year. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Clemson fans probably still thought they'd win that by double digits.
I didn't at NC State. No,
Okay.
in 17 I did not. I don't know. It's a weird deal of not knowing that. Yeah. And now here's the next question for you. Maybe November 7th of 2020 in South Bend, Indiana.
But I would have to think ahead to 20.
But when's the next time Clemson's going to be underdog in a regular season game?
Oh, man. That's crazy. It's crazy.
My friend Chad from Columbia, who I know is a subscriber.
Oh, yeah, I know Chad.
Chad said that he asked me the other day, my son is 8 months old, and he said, how old will your son be when South Carolina beats Clemson again? I told my wife the other day, because we found out we were pregnant on Father's Day, which is a great Father's Day present.
That's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
And I said, since you're pregnant, Clemson's won 23 straight football games in the national championship. The boy's undefeated. I believe in life at conception too. Since the boy was living, right? Clemson's 23-game winning streak and undefeated.
Just to put a bow, we're going to talk about South Carolina in a second, but just to put a bow on top of this all national scrutiny and all, I went and spoke at the Greenville lunch group at Sobeys last week.
Good guys over there.
Yeah, and I joked to begin with. I said, the real reason I was asked to come here was to explain why I voted Clemson number 19 in my most recent poll. Had some people almost throwing their water at me, but at the end I said, Dabo comes up with all these slogans, the word of the year was joy last year, and then, the best ever thing on the tombstone. If they win it all this year, what they should put on the tombstone is others receiving votes.
I love it. Instead of the Roy Bus stuff. Hey, let me say this about the ranking stuff. I had Clemson preseason number 1. We do a power poll ranking every Wednesday. I had Clemson preseason number 1. After a couple of games or whatever, I dropped them as low as third a few of those weeks. To my point about Boston College, I voted them number 1 again for the first time in 6 weeks, maybe. Mm-hmm. I thought that they looked like the best team in the country last weekend.
That's fair. I mean, no argument there. Yeah. South Carolina.
South Carolina.
South Carolina, no R on the end. Interesting, and I don't want to come off as, picking at the carcass or whatever, but it's kind of fascinating, like that a couple of weeks after one of the biggest wins in school history at Georgia, it's fire Muschamp. I mean, there have been, after 2 losses this season, they want to run them out of town. North Carolina.
Yeah.
And then Tennessee. My theory is that Steve Spurrier and Clemson have warped the brains of South Carolina fans, meaning relative to expectations and what constitutes something to run a guy out of town for. Mm-hmm. Is that what do you think about that? I mean, have you gotten a lot of calls from fans?
No, they don't call.
Okay,
South Carolina fans don't call. But I read their message board, and I have some, like you, I have some great Gamecock friends. And I think you're right. One thing we got to realize with South Carolina in that 4-year run, really 3, maybe 4. Some people say 5-year run, but Clemson should have beat them in 2009. And Clemson was a better team and didn't play well down there.
I think you and I have disagreed on that before. I still think Clemson was sort of not like fool's gold or anything like that, but you
might be right about that.
They were kind of flimsy.
They had their starting center, the kid from Irmo, that dominated Clemson. Like, he's not been played very well at all. Like, it was one of those games. Anyway.
Yeah.
But there was a 3 or 4 year period in there that South Carolina was a really, really good football team. And Chief Chavis was at LSU maybe one of those years, and he told the staff at T.O. Hanna that this is the best defensive line in the country. They were better than Alabama's defensive line. I mean, they were a really good team. And so that does skew you a little bit. With that said, I mean, I've been following them since the Carlin days, even the Dietzel days, I guess. What Spurrier did change things there a little bit, but the talk I hear now is what Carlin went through, is what Richard Bell went through, is what Joe Morrison didn't get a hold of. Sparky Woods certainly went through it, and Holtz and Spurrier were immune to that. But I don't think that he changed it because he showed they could do it, but still I think they're the same. And here's it's a tough job.
It's a brutal job right now.
Right.
Because of those factors.
Georgia and Clemson.
Huh?
Because of Georgia and Clemson.
And see Spurrier.
Right. And yeah, Spurrier proved that they could do it. But with that said, it's not an impossible job. It can be done. I think the guy, I have more doubts now than I've ever had against him. And we talked about this in the preseason where it was a preemptive strike of schedule. We could be a great team and have a worse record because we got Alabama, we have Georgia, we have A&M on the road, and we have Clemson. But when you lose to North Carolina and we lose to Missouri and Tennessee by 20 points apiece, they beat them by combined 40 points in those two games, then you can't play the schedule card anymore. No. And I tell you, I think that Muschamp is now in this. I think the officiating thing they did at Florida, I think that was another diversionary tactic of don't look at what's happening, look over here thing. And it ended up, I don't want to cost them a football game against Tennessee or not, but in the end, if Muschamp doesn't get it done, which I'm not sure he will now, they would have missed an opportunity with Tennessee being down and Florida still trying to find it and Missouri and Kentucky and all that stuff. And, I mean, Georgia's still going to be Georgia, but they're going to miss an opportunity because I really believe that Mullen, he's impressed me this year more than I thought, and it looked like to me in the second half of the season so far that Pruitt is farther ahead than Muschamp. Pruitt in year 2 is farther ahead than Muschamp in year 4.
But how much of an opportunity do they really miss when they're really not? Like, if we sat down right now for the next 8 hours and watched the North Carolina-South Carolina game, the South Carolina and the South Carolina-Tennessee game, and even the South Carolina-Missouri game, and you took the logos off the uniforms, how much difference? Like, is South Carolina more talented than Tennessee?
No. Tennessee's a better football team. I don't mean that. I mean that they aren't better.
Right.
They missed an opportunity.
Yeah.
Not because they're better and they lost to an inferior team. I'm saying that in the big picture, that Florida. My personal feeling is Florida would be better in the next 5 years than they have been the first 4 years of Muschamp. And I think that Tennessee will be better in the next 4 years than they were in the first 4 years of Muschamp. And I don't know about some of those other guys in there, but so in that pecking order, you're not going to get Florida and Tennessee down forever. And they didn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
In those 4 years.
Well, I look back at the Spurrier years and say that's when I say they messed up by not doing anything. You know, when Missouri is winning the division and South Carolina's stubbing its toe against at Tennessee when it was better than Tennessee.
Right.
Stubbing its toe at home against Auburn when it was better than Auburn, and just having these hiccup games. Stubbing its toe at Kentucky a week after they beat number 1 Alabama in 2010.
To your point about being better, because we pay so close attention to our teams, Clemson and South Carolina State, and because we follow their recruiting, whatever, then I think that we have an inflated. I mean, Vegas had South Carolina as a 5.5 team win this year.
Right.
They aren't that talented.
Right. Well, and so, I mean, they have middle of the road SEC talent.
Right.
Like top 20 recruiting classes. I mean, that's great in the national thing context. But in the SEC, that's like you're like 7th or 8th. And so I watched a replay of the Tennessee game this week. And I look at South Carolina, I'm like, that's a pretty good team.
Yeah.
And that's a middle-of-the-road team in the SEC, and they have some really good pieces. They have the defensive line manhandled Georgia, for gosh sakes. Yeah. They have some, obviously, good quarterback. But, okay, there are some extenuating factors. You have a quarterback that is not full strength. He can't really step into his throws that I can see. You have injury, Dowdle's out. And then you have some really good pieces on defense. Defensive line, some at linebacker, corner, safeties, terrible, horrible. So when you get,
I'm not sold on the corners either, and certain schemes and certain things maybe.
But they're good. Can we just say they're good?
They're good, but they're good when Georgia couldn't test them.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah.
Right. Tennessee had receivers to test them, and the safeties didn't play well.
Right.
But the corners got beat too.
Right. True.
And that's where. Alabama didn't look like they have a hard time on their corners, and Clemson, I don't think they have a hard time on their corners. I mean, 6'4" corner. I think I'm licking my chops to get behind that guy.
Yeah. I mean, I watched the North Carolina game. I did not think going in that North Carolina was going to look equal to South Carolina talent-wise, but they were. Yeah. They did look that way, and they looked that way against Clemson too. Yeah. Not equal to Clemson, but comparable to South Carolina. So my question is, why is there outrage, and it's unforgivable to lose, when you lose to North Carolina and then...
Your head coach told people in the preseason, this is our best football team since I've been here.
Point. Yeah.
Now, to that point, though, we have had now 8 years of Will Muschamp as a head coach.
Yeah.
And for the South Carolina fans that want to say, you got to give him time. And I do believe at South Carolina, what he inherited was not good.
Right. It was bad.
And I do believe at South Carolina, a rebuild at South Carolina is tougher than a rebuild at other places, at some places. With that said, he has been a head football coach now for 8 years and 12. He's been a head football coach for 80-some-odd games, 90 games. He's shown you who he is.
Their scoring offense under him. South Carolina is 77th nationally right now. Last year they were 57th. The year before, 99th. His first year they were 116th. When he was at Florida, it was 56th, 113, 78, 71st. So the best he's done, 56th.
Two things. Go look at his offensive coordinator hires.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute mess. Mm-hmm. It was Notre Dame's former head coach, Charlie Weiss.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
It was Kurt Roper.
At both places.
And then he rehired Kurt Roper again. And then, I mean, you and I can agree. After watching what Chad Morris did here, and after watching what Jeff and Tony are doing here right now, and after watching what Brent Venables has done here, you and I understand the importance of, man, those guys in those positions are among the top 2 or 3 things a head coach is going to decide. He went with Kurt Roper at 2 different locations, and then instead of going out and hiring a big-name guy or an up-and-comer kind of guy, he hired Brian McClendon, his wide receiver coach, who had never been a guy before, because they didn't want to lose him as a recruiter.
And because...
And a guy who hadn't recruited very well since he took over the spot.
And because he did well in the bowl game against Michigan. Like that's your audition for that big of a decision?
Yeah, one game through that. So my caller Chad talks about it, where it's emotional intelligence. And I think it's fair through 8 years and through almost 100 football games as Will Muschamp be the head coach to question the emotional intelligence.
Two things. I don't disagree. I don't think they need to run him out of town, because I think I don't know, like, a replacement. What replacement is going to do better in recruiting? Like, I don't think people understand, or like the average person understands, how hard it is when Clemson's doing what it's doing. Yeah. When Georgia is doing what it's doing, and now with North Carolina. Yeah. North Carolina is a factor now in recruiting.
Right.
What do you do? Like a top 20 class, middle of the road in the SEC, that's pretty good. Yeah. And that staff is pretty good at recruiting. So here, you don't need to run them out of town. But here's the troubling thing. The most troubling thing to me is that Ray Tanner appears to be joined at the hip with Muschamp and how he has sort of handled himself, like, publicly. And he's almost like a Muschamp fanboy, you know?
He has to be, though.
But he needs to tell that there needs to be a come to Jesus. Like, you got to step away from the offense. You know, you need to hire like an offensive guru type. But I don't know who they're going to. Anyway.
In the end, though, I mean, you kind of still are who you are, because you could do what Florida State did and sell your soul and hire Kendall Browse. And at times I think, man, you know what, Florida State's a little bit better on offense. And then at times I go, was it worth selling your soul over? Because in the end, I mean, who you recruit on offense is who you recruit, who you get on offense sometimes. I think Ray Tanner is tied at the hip with him. I'm not sure Ray Tanner will be able to hire the next coach there. The buyout is an issue. You make a great point, and something I talk about all the time is it's not his fault that Georgia is the best they've been in 40 years, and Clemson's the best they've ever been. You mentioned North Carolina now. A lot of it does have to do with time, and you're 100% right about that. And it is a very difficult job, but I just don't have the feeling that this is the guy that's going to. It takes a special guy to overcome what they have right now. And finally, let me say this about that.
Yeah.
If you're a rational thinking college football fan and you're a fan of the University of South Carolina, I can sit here and tell you that it's a tough job. It's a tough rebuild. Georgia's great, Clemson's great, and all this. I can tell you all those things, and I can tell you that, man, we need to be really, really patient. The guy's working hard, seemingly recruiting okay, even though I question some of that. But the guy's working really hard, and we're not going to be able to get us better, so we need to stay very patient. And in theory, man, I love the ability to say, you need to stay patient. In practice, it's something I pray for, patience all the time.
Yeah.
I don't have it. And as a fan with this win now mentality that we all have, and I'm seeing my guys, my coworkers I meet at the water cooler, and they're Clemson and Georgia fans, and they're winning like this, you can tell me patience all you want to. And I got it. But to be honest with you, I don't have it. I don't have patience. I need to win.
Well, you just said they need to hire only a special coach can overcome the obstacles that are surrounding them.
And Lou Holtz did some of that, and Steve Spurrier did some of that. That being said, though, what you got with Lou Holtz and the beauty of Lou Holtz, he didn't work.
Yeah.
And what you got with Steve Spurrier and the beauty of Steve Spurrier, in the end, he didn't work. And so you kind of knew, if I was wrong about South Carolina, I was wrong that it happened 1 year later than I thought it was going to happen. I thought in that final year,
13.
Clowney and Connor Shaw bailed them out time after time. Connor Shaw did it on third down all the time, and barely be 3rd and 8, he scrambled for 9, and he saved that season for them. But when A&M beat them up and down the field that next year, Spurrier's last year, that was 1 year later. I thought it was going to be, but you could see it coming that it was slowly they were deteriorating right in front of your eyes.
So, okay, they need a special person to get better than they are, to overcome all these obstacles. The retread route, the legendary retread route is exhausted. That's gone. So they're gonna have to roll the dice.
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna fire Muschamp, who is built. Am I exaggerating? Is this too much? A fairly solid foundation? Is that too much?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
Yes.
How would you describe I mean, you got a really good quarterback. Freshman.
Is he? Because that's what I thought Lorenzo Nunez was, and that's what I thought that Brandon McElwain was, and that's what I thought Jake Bentley was, and that's what I thought.
That gets back to the offensive problem under Muschamp.
That's
like
true.
He doesn't. It's fairly clear he doesn't develop quarterbacks.
You can say, well, let me ask you. I'm gonna get back to that answer. What is the brand at South Carolina right now? What is the identity of South Carolina's football program right now under Will Muschamp?
Reader glasses.
They gave those away at one of the games this year. They got the first 500 fans to get whatever, first 1,000 fans to get readers.
I just think part of it, Mickey, is like, with the exception of 5 years of their entire history, 7 or 8 wins has been pretty good.
Yeah. But it's hard when Clemson and Georgia are doing what they're doing. It's hard for that to happen. So all right. Is it a solid foundation? Maybe.
Now, if they tank from here on out, lose to Appalachian State, what are they right now? 3-5.
3-5.
If they finish 4
and
8, I think it's hard to.
Let me frame it this way. First of all, he has an easy job in some ways, because Arkansas. You're not scared of Arkansas. You're not scared of Ole Miss.
Right.
You're not scared of Mississippi State.
Right.
You're not scared of Vanderbilt.
Right.
You're not scared of Kentucky. You're not scared. You shouldn't be scared of Tennessee. You shouldn't be scared of maybe Texas A&M. I mean, there's 6 or 7 or 8 teams in that league that, I mean, you're really truly scared of Auburn. I mean, Auburn should be better than South Carolina, I guess. But there are a lot of those, it's doable. Those are very doable games. And then you're going to get 3 or 4 non-conference games. You're not going to beat Clemson, but you win the other 3 non-conference games, and you can win 8 or 9 games, and that's not a difficult thing to do. But going back to, do you fire them or not? And the buyout is a factor, and make no mistake about that, because you're talking about the pool of, you're already in debt, and then who you're going to hire, and then you got to get that pool and go buy a buyout from somebody else. I get all that. But in the end, here's the question I ask you. If you're Ray Tanner, in your mind, do you truly believe that Will Muschamp is the guy to get us to where we want to go in football?
I think he does, and I think that's part of the problem. Like I said,
Do you, Larry Williams, think that Will Muschamp is the guy over the next 5 to 10 years to take South Carolina where they want to be in football?
Where do they want to be?
Where do you want to be if you're South Carolina?
That's my whole point.
Yeah. And you're not wrong about that.
You're talking about Mississippi State and Ole Miss. You shouldn't be scared of all these programs. That's true. That's true. But again, Clemson, Georgia, North Carolina, you're in a state with 5 million people. You're being owned,
right?
With the high profile,
and the state's not producing football players right now either.
What's the answer? And I'm not, I'm not a recruiting guy. I know that.
We talk about timing, right? So Georgia and Clemson, that's timing, and North Carolina being better now is timing. How about Spurrier took advantage of it, man? Lattimore and Alshon Jeffrey,
the stars aligned.
Gilmore, everything is right. So it just happened to line up right, and it's not going that way right now for him. I just don't believe in today's world, which it's an offensive world. And Kirby's doing it and Nick Saban's doing it, but across the country, I think it's the Lincoln Rileys of the world. I think it's the Days of the world, the Dabos of the world, these offensive people. That's where football's headed to me, a little bit of that. And if not, you better hire some sort of guru on that side of it. And then B, I always use the phrase dumb jock mentality, but I'm not sure I can just go out and just be tougher. And we're just going to work harder.
Right.
And we're just going to be more physical. And we're going to – I don't think that works anymore. I think it is a CEO, branding, marketing, image, identity. And I'm not sure Will Muschamp is the guy to be the CEO of your company.
He seems like a meathead.
Yeah.
Now, 2 weeks ago, South Carolina fans would have strangled me for saying that. Now they're giving me a standing ovation for saying that, if they're listening.
On the outside looking in. That was, to me, Fromm played terrible, and Blankenship missed kicks that he doesn't miss.
Yeah.
Now, again, South Carolina played great. I'm not taking anything away from them. But Georgia didn't play the way they should have played football that day. But even after that game, did you really, truly believe that South Carolina had turned the corner?
No.
So see?
They had 270 yards, right? And they won at Georgia.
If anything, we learned more about Kirby Smart.
Absolutely.
Over the year we've been doing the Dubcast, we've developed a great relationship with the folks over at the Abernathy Boutique Hotel. In addition to being a great meeting spot for our interviews we conduct with local personalities, it's also a fantastic place to stay. The Abernathy is rolling out a loyalty savings program for 2019. After your third stay, you'll automatically be rewarded with an exclusive offer. It can be applied to future reservations for the remainder of the year. 15% off rooms, 15% off food and beverage at Taps Bar and Cafe. Learn more at theabernathy.com.
So, all right. So, Kirby Smart, is it safe to say he's a really good coach, not a great coach? Really good.
I'm not a believer in Kirby Smart.
So good.
Yeah, Kirby Smart is in. Okay.
Just bear with me.
Okay.
Good coach.
Good, but let me say this quickly.
All right.
Kirby Smart, as bad as it is in the state of South Carolina, as far as high school talent, we are in this unprecedented era of the state of Georgia producing all these 5 stars that like we've never seen before, and you've got to find a way to lose at Georgia right now. And I say this all the time: that there's going to be a time where Kirby Smart will have so much talent that even Georgia, will not be able to Kirby it up. That Kirby will not Kirby the thing up and lose to Vanderbilt, lose to Georgia Tech, or go for it on 4th down, or fake a punt, or do something stupid, fake a field goal like he did at LSU, do something stupid to mess the thing up. So he is one of these. He gets credit. I put it like this: if Kirby Smart was at South Carolina right now, and Will Muschamp was at Georgia right now, I'm not sure it'd look a whole lot different.
That's exactly what I was getting at. So if we just record alone, getting to the playoff, all that, Kirby, at the very least, good coach.
Good coach.
Has done a good job.
I don't think a top 10 coach, but good job.
Okay. If Georgia doesn't move in back in 2016 or whenever that was, 15, when they heard South Carolina and Kirby were talking, and Kirby ends up going to South Carolina, is he doing any? No. Is he doing any better than Muschamp has done?
You probably heard this. I don't know if you and I ever talked about this. I don't think the listeners understand, readers understand. Like, we talk a lot off the phone about stuff that we don't ever publish or ever talk about on the radio. But I mentioned this on the show today because I think it's past enough time. You hold on to stuff where now it doesn't hurt people. But there were people on Clemson staff that were very familiar with Kirby Smart in his days at Alabama that were rooting that Kirby Smart got the job at South Carolina.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And Now I can say this. We could say, would Muschamp be the same at Georgia? I don't know. He had Florida, and he gets a lot of credit for turning around the Florida culture. But if you remember,
does he really get the credit?
Well, they said this. Well, Urban Meyer left behind this mess.
Yeah.
But if you remember, the only good year he's ever had. In his second year there, he took him to the Sugar Bowl, and Louisville blitzkrieged them. And if you remember, Florida had tons of personal foul penalties. The guys got kicked out of the game and all that. He had a bunch of thugs that year, and that was his best year.
Yeah.
So he shouldn't get credit for any of that, I don't feel like.
And he's almost, when South Carolina hired him, he's almost on like a probationary type. Like they hire him saying, okay, this offensive thing's an issue. You need to get this worked out.
So you hire Chad Roper.
Kurt Roper. And then McClendon. It doesn't. Yeah, something's
emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, is there a guy? I mean, remember this: Ray Tanner's hands were tied a little bit. He thought he had Tom Herman, and either Jeff Scott or the Citadel ruined that for him. Because
I forgot all about.
There were some talks that Jeff Scott and them were close, and I think he talked him out of that job. And it turned out he did the right thing because he got Texas, which is a better job.
Yeah.
But I think the Citadel, he was all set to take that until the Citadel beat South Carolina, and it sent him a message of saying, well, this thing's worse than I thought it was going to be. So he got turned down by them, and they got beat to the punch on Fuente to Virginia Tech, which I'm still, I don't know what happened there. I'm still baffled by what's going on there.
And were they not interested in Lincoln Riley?
Yeah, and that's where you have to try to catch lightning in a bottle. Clemson did it. Oklahoma did it. I think Ohio State has done it. Now, that lightning, those guys inherited, Dabo didn't, but those other guys inherited some great stuff.
Yeah.
Would Lincoln Riley have turned around South Carolina? I don't know. I'm not sure of that. But you got to identify a guy, and I think it has to be a younger guy and it has to be an offensive guy.
Will Healy at Charlotte.
Looks like Dabo 2.0.
Roll the dice. It's just going to be a dice roll regardless.
A high school coach told me that Will Muschamp, either at one of their practices or at the high school convention in his very first year, said, I'm going to be the anti-Dabo. I'm going to do the exact opposite of what that guy's doing. Now, how smart is that? Let me see the guy that's winning national championships and going to college. So I'm going to do the exact opposite. So why not? Go hire your next Dabo.
The adversarial, like the purposely adversarial sort of nature that Muschamp has toward Dabo.
Yeah.
It's too much. Like, I understand your rivals, but it's like he forces it almost.
It feels like the WWE thing. Like somebody's going to write the script out where I got to go act like how I really don't like the guy.
So, all right, last question.
All right.
Let's say you mentioned how much, I guess, collateral damage the Citadel loss inflicted in terms of being able to go out and find a good coach. What if Spurrier, after they beat Clemson and Wisconsin in 2013, which I'm guarantee you he wishes he would have done, hangs it up then, walks out in a blaze of glory, after winning 5 straight against Clemson and then the 3 straight 11-win seasons. What if he leaves then? What kind of coach could they have hired? Like, how much higher profile of a coach could they have hired at that point instead of a year later after losing to the Citadel and after it was clear that it was a mess?
Yeah, I don't know that just because of who's available. And then, they got that adage of, do you want to follow a legend?
That's true. Very true.
With that said, though, if you're a South Carolina fan, aren't you mad at Steve Spurrier for leaving the program the way he left it? Like, all the great things you did here, that's great. But, dude, you took time off. You were at the wheel. You fell asleep at the wheel, and you left us in shambles. And I don't think that's part of the story. But to me, you're still paying for it now, and I'm thankful for what you did for me. But the lasting memory I have of you is you fell asleep at the wheel.
It's the right take, I think, if you're a Gamecock fan. It's a little of both.
Yeah.
Or half of both, right? Like, you're like, man, he did amazing things
People
for
forget
us.
They weren't great in those first few years either now.
Right. But I'm just saying, you're perturbed that Nick Chubb and Raekwon McMillan come to Columbia to visit. They're playing golf or something.
Somewhere. Hey, all right, I know you got to go quickly, though.
That's all right.
Getting back to your original statement, what we sat down to do. You think Alabama, LSU, who wins?
Since it's in Tuscaloosa, I'll take Alabama.
Alabama, Tua going to play?
Yeah, I think he'll play.
All right, so Alabama runs the table. They go to Auburn and win?
Auburn can make life difficult for them.
I agree. In Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
With their defensive line.
But Bo Nix, man, even when Bo Nix was leading them to the come from behind win against Oregon, and even when he went to A&M and did what he did, I haven't seen it. He just looks ordinary to me. And then at LSU, he was terrible.
Florida or Georgia this weekend?
Oh man, I haven't even thought about that game. I'll take Florida because Georgia's their problem. After we just sat here for 20 minutes and talked about South Carolina's offensive philosophy, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have guys that stretch the field.
They had 35 yards passing against Kentucky. I know it was raining, but my goodness gracious.
And I mean, they miss Hardman the most.
Yeah.
That dude is a dang stud.
I think they missed Jim Chaney a little bit, even though he ran it a bunch. But, yeah, he stretched it a little bit there, too. All right, so Florida, Alabama, SEC championship, maybe?
Yeah.
All right. If Florida wins, how many SEC teams get in?
To the playoff?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I don't even want to. I think we talked about this earlier, but everybody, every week is, oh my gosh, what if this, what if that, that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I purposely just ignore it all.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, you know what? When it happens, it'll happen.
It'll be pretty clear cut.
Yeah.
I did this research the other day. We've only had a couple of instances. The first year, we had Baylor and TCU. And I'm talking about the playoff era.
Yeah.
Baylor and TCU had one loss and didn't get in. Now, we had 4 one-loss or undefeated conference champions, and the Big 12 at the time didn't have a conference championship game. So then you could say that the only team that has a Power 5 conference that won their conference championship game and had one loss or less that didn't get in was last year Ohio State. And the reason they did not get in was that Notre Dame went undefeated. We had 3 undefeated teams, and Oklahoma was better than Ohio State. So I don't think, in my mind, of all the scenarios out there, I think that a one-loss Oklahoma conference champion or a one-loss Ohio State conference champion, a one-loss Oregon or Utah conference champion, because Utah's still one loss too. Mm-hmm. I don't think Clemson can have one loss and do this. I think those teams get in over a one-loss non-conference champion Alabama. Alabama got in. The year they got in as a non-conference champion was the year that Ohio State had 2 losses and won the Big Ten, and Southern Cal had 3 losses and won the Pac-12. Mm-hmm. Had either of those 2 conferences, had Ohio State or Southern Cal only had 1 loss, Alabama would not have gotten in. Right. As a matter of fact, Wisconsin was undefeated. Wisconsin lost in the championship game of the Big Ten. Had they won, Alabama wouldn't have gotten in.
Yeah.
So, one-loss non-conference champion Alabama would get in. And if we had 2 losses out there, but as long as the Big Ten, Pac-12, Big 12 have a one-loss conference champion, I don't think we're going to see 2 SEC teams in.
And
Make sense?
It does. And you made a really good point the other day on your show when somebody called in, I'm so sick of this ESPN bias and it's going to affect the playoff. And you said, look, pump the brakes. Like the playoff committee,
they don't buy
the selection committee is a totally different entity from all this AP poll and all that. They have done a good job.
They have. And you know why? Because they fast forward to these games. These you watch all these games in this condensed version.
Yeah.
And then there's metrics of ball or game control. Clemson's going to rank fairly high on that game score and that game control deal. Outside the North Carolina game, like we talked about earlier in this podcast, 41-6 is their second worst game of the year on the road at Syracuse.
Yeah, so they're winning games by 29, an average of 29 points, even with a 1-point win.
Right. So they're going to be Clemson. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Tuesday that they're 5th, and there'll be an outrage on Tiger Illustrated on my show. But Alabama, they're going to play each other, and Alabama and LSU are going to play each other next week, and then Penn State and Ohio State are going to play. So all that's going to happen. I think Clemson fans understand that.
5th?
Clemson?
Yeah.
I think they could be. I don't think they will be.
Okay.
I think Clemson will be 3rd when it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Mm-hmm. And then we'll move up to 2nd. Mm-hmm. But man, I sure would like to go to Atlanta rather than going to the desert
Oh,
again.
man. Yes.
Oh, gracious. Anyway.
Mickey, I got to get my Brent Venables costume on.
The neon hat. That's great. That's
I can talk about it now because this is going to be published, released tomorrow. So this ought to be interesting. Man, that hour and 40 minutes just flew by.
Hour 40.
So you got to get back to your family.
Yeah. I always enjoy it though. You know that.
This is your third time, so I think this is a record for.
On Saturday Night Live they did this thing about the 5-timers club. How many times to host? So is there any other 3-time guys with you?
No. I think a number of other people have done it twice, but I think you're the first.
It's an honor, buddy. It's an honor.
So. All right, man. We'll do it again sometime, maybe after the season, and do another reset. So
thanks for having me.
Thanks
buddy.
for joining me, man.
Yeah, man, for sure.
Okay, thanks to Mickey Plyler, who had already talked for 3 hours yesterday and was gracious enough to come over to the office and talk for about an hour and 40 more. So appreciate his time. Also appreciate our sponsors of the podcast, including title sponsor Parham Smith & Arts & Huddle Law Firm in downtown Greenville. Most of all, thanks to all of you for making this a part of your listening routine. Everybody have a wonderful and safe weekend, and we'll be back next week. Cheers.